The desert is not silent. It is merely waiting. If you stand at the edge of the Great Salt Plain in Iran, or amidst the wind-sculpted ruins of southern Iraq when the sun begins its bruised descent, you will feel a pressure against your skin that the history books cannot explain. It is the weight of a billion eyes that are no longer there. We are taught to look at the ruins of Eridu and Nippur as the birthplaces of commerce, law, and the written word, the humble cradles of a rising species. But if you look closer, past the sun-bleached mud bricks and the academic certainty of the 19th century excavators, a different story emerges. Colder story. We have been told that the Anunnaki were the architects of our world, the golden masters who descended from the heavens to bestow the gifts of civilization upon a primitive race. We have been told they were gods, but the clay does not lie, and the clay tells us that these were not gods in the throes of triumph. They were survivors in the throes of a desperate, shivering terror. They did not come to Earth to rule. They came to Earth to hide. Think for a moment about the sheer biological improbability of the Sumerian emergence. In the blink of a geological eye, a group of hunter-gatherers transitioned into a complex society with advanced mathematics, precision astronomy, and a legal code that rivals our own. Mainstream archaeology, led by the noble tradition of men like Sir Leonard Woolley and Samuel Noah Kramer, tells us this was the natural progression of human ingenuity, a spark of genius in the Fertile Crescent. They point to the gradual layering of the tell, the slow accumulation of pottery shards, the evolution of the plow. This is the wall of accepted history. It is sturdy, it is logical, and it is almost certainly a veil. Because when you translate the earliest liturgical laments, the tone is not one of gratitude toward benevolent teachers. It is a record of trauma. It is the testimony of a witness watching a superior power cowering in the dark. In the British Museum, tucked away in the shadows of the Kuyunjik collection, sits a fragment of clay known as Tablet K.8538. To the casual observer, it is a damaged planisphere, a circular map of the stars recovered from the ruins of the royal palace at Nineveh. For decades, it was dismissed as a late-period Assyrian copy of a misremembered sky. But in 2008, a digital analysis revealed a terrifying truth. The positions of the stars on that tablet do not correspond to the era of the Assyrians, nor even the early Sumerians. They record a specific night in 3123 BC. The tablet tracks the trajectory of a massive luminous object, an object the text describes as a stone from heaven that did not merely fall, but steered. It tore through the atmosphere with a frequency that shattered the windows of the soul. And precisely at this moment, the records of the great cities of Eridu and Nippur simply stop. There is no evidence of a siege. There are no charred remains of a great fire. There is only a sudden, silent abandonment. The gods, we are told, left their sheepfolds. They fled like birds from their nests. Why would an all-powerful deity flee? From what could a master of the elements possibly run? The answer lies in what the Sumerians called the evil wind. Traditional scholarship interprets this as a metaphor for a devastating dust storm or perhaps a plague. But the descriptions in the lamentation over the destruction of Sumer and Uar are chillingly clinical. The wind is described as a force that envelopes the land like a heavy garment. It did not topple the walls. It did not burn the timber, targeted the blood. The texts speak of the gods themselves, the Anunnaki, becoming pale, their skin losing its luster, their breath becoming a ragged whistle in their chests. They were being hunted by something that moved not through the gates of the city, but through the very fabric of the atmosphere. A biological signature had been detected. The silent watchers, those entities hinted at in the most forbidden margins of the cuneiform tradition, had found the signal. The Great Displacement was not an expansion of an empire. It was the final, frantic move in a cosmic game of hide and seek. Consider the Me. In Sumerian mythology, the Me are described as divine decrees or social institutions, concepts like victory, prostitution, or law. But the way they are handled in the myths is strikingly physical. They are loaded onto boats. They are stolen and stored. They are described as shining discs that could be activated to change the reality of a city. If we strip away the veneer of religious allegory, What we are looking at are data storage units. These were the cultural and technological blueprints of a civilization that had already lost its home. The Anunnaki were not teaching us. They were backing up their hard drives. They were burying the me deep within the Earth's crust, in vaults we have yet to rediscover, hoping that if they were erased from the surface, their essence might survive in the belly of the world. They were preparing for a reset. They were preparing for us to be the guardians of a history we weren't meant to understand. We must look at the great leap forward in human evolution through this lens of desperation. The mainstream narrative struggles to explain the sudden appearance of the FOXP2 gene, the language gene, or the mysterious junk DNA that makes up the vast majority of our genome. We are told it is evolutionary debris, the discarded experiments of a blind watchmaker. But what if it is camouflage? The radical theory suggests that the Anunnaki did not create humanity to be a slave race to mine gold. That is a cover story, a myth designed for the consumption of those who might come looking. No, they spliced their own refined, highly detectable genetic code with the indigenous primates of this planet to create a biological noise. They were diluting their signature. They were hiding their royal lineage in the common clay of a billion human beings. We are not their servants. We are their heat shields. We are the static in the signal that keeps the pursuers from finding the survivors. The archives of the 19th century are filled with the accounts of men who went mad looking for the source of the Sumerian king list. Men like George Smith, who died in the heat of the Mesopotamian sun, obsessed with the idea that the pre-Diluvian kings lived for tens of thousands of years. The academic world laughs at these numbers, calling them symbolic exaggerations of a culture obsessed with the number 60. But what if the numbers are literal? What if they represent the natural lifespan of a race that evolved under a different sun, with a different rate of cellular decay? And what if that lifespan began to shrink the moment they arrived on Earth? Not because of sin, but because they were dying in a foreign environment, breathing an atmosphere that was slowly poisoning them. They were refugees in a bunker that was also a tomb. Every ritual we perform, every temple we have ever built, is a distorted memory of that arrival. The ziggurats were not stairways to heaven. They were landing pads that became shrines once the ships stopped coming. The priests who wore the fish skins of Oans were not mimicking a sea god. They were remembering the pressure suits of those who stepped out of the water to find a world that was too bright, too loud, and too dangerous. We are living in the ruins of a cosmic shipwreck, and we have mistaken the survivors for masters. We have worshipped their fear and called it divine mystery. The silent watchers are the void in our history. They are the reason for the great silence that Fermi noted, the lack of radio signals from a crowded universe. The universe is not empty. It is quiet because everyone is hiding. The Anunnaki broke the protocol of the silence. They made a noise, they were found, and they fled to the furthest, most insignificant rock they could find. Earth, a world of tectonic instability, of wild weather, of short-lived creatures. The perfect place to disappear. They thought that by merging with us, they could vanish into the background radiation of a primitive world. But the planisphere of Nineveh suggests that the pursuers did not lose the trail. They followed the stone from heaven. They watched the evil wind descend. And then they waited. They are waiting still. When we look at the gaps in our fossil record, we aren't looking at missing links. We are looking at the places where the story was edited, where the layers of the earth were scrubbed clean to remove the evidence of a technology that shouldn't exist. There are strata in the Gobi Desert where the sand has been turned to glass, not by the slow heat of the sun, but by a thermal event that matches the signature of a high-energy discharge. Mainstream science calls these tektites, or the results of ancient meteor impacts. But there is no crater. There is only the glass. And beneath that glass, there are no bones. Only the silence of a species that was there one moment and gone the next. We must ask ourselves why the Sumerian gods are always depicted as being in a state of me, a state of being clothed in radiance. This radiance was not a halo. It was a field, an artificial environment. They could not survive in our world without it. They were fragile. They were broken. When the me were lost, when the evil wind blew, they didn't just die. They unraveled. Their technology failed. Their biological camouflage was pierced, and they were forced into the deep places of the earth. The myth of the underworld, of Kor, of the land of no return, is the traumatized memory of the last survivors retreating into the crust, into the geothermal heat, far away from the eyes in the sky. The history of the world is not a line. It is a circle of resets. Every 12,000 years, the silent watchers return to check the traps. They look for the signal. They look for the radiance. And we, the biological camouflage, are left to pick up the pieces of a civilization we didn't build. We find their discs and call them holy relics. We find their landing pads and call them altars. We look at the stars and feel a sense of longing, not because we belong there, but because we are the descendants of those who were exiled from there. We are the children of the refugees, and the Great Displacement is the secret heart of our identity. The silence of the modern laboratory is perhaps the most profound mask of all. In the sterile halls of the Human Genome Project, scientists have spent decades mapping the 3 billion base pairs that compose the human blueprint. They found a masterpiece of biological engineering, yet within that masterpiece lies a staggering, inexplicable wasteland. Approximately 98% of our DNA is classified as non-coding, popularly known as junk DNA. The mainstream scientific consensus, solid and unyielding, suggests that this is merely evolutionary baggage, the accumulated debris of millions of years of viral infections and genetic mutations that serve no purpose. It is the biological equivalent of a dusty attic. But if we view this through the lens of the Great Displacement, the junk takes on a terrifyingly different character. It is not debris. It is a cryptographic firewall. It is a mass of white noise designed to drown out a specific, royal frequency. The Anunnaki did not just create us to work. They created us to serve as a massive planetary-scale camouflage net. By folding their own complex genetic sequences into the chaotic, repetitive strands of a rapidly reproducing primate, they were performing the ultimate act of data encryption. They were hiding a needle in a haystack of 7 billion souls. Consider the ALU elements within our genome, short, repetitive sequences that have inexplicably multiplied within the human lineage over the last few million years. Mainstream biology views them as selfish genes, parasites of the genome. But look at their behavior. They jump, they rearrange, they create a constant state of genetic flux. To an orbital scanner looking for the stable, refined signature of a Type 2 civilization, the human race would appear as a blurred, static-filled mess. We are a biological smokescreen. The silent watchers are not looking for us. They are looking for them. And as long as we remain a chaotic, divided, and genetically messy species, the mask holds. This is why the Sumerian texts speak of the gods being disturbed by the noise of humanity. We are told Enlil sought to destroy mankind because our uproar kept him from sleeping. But the word translated as uproar or noise is rigmu. In the archaic context, it implies more than just sound. It refers to a signal, a vibration, a frequency. We were becoming too coherent. We were beginning to resonate in a way that could be detected from the void. The flood was not a punishment for sin. It was a desperate attempt to reset the signal before the hunters arrived. To understand the architecture of this fear, we must look beneath the earth. Mainstream archaeology is fascinated by the surface, the pyramids of Giza, the stones of Stonehenge, the ruins of Machu Picchu. They see these as monuments to the sun, to the heavens, to the ego of kings. But the most anomalous structures on our planet are not built upward. They are carved downward. In the heart of Turkey lies the Derinkuyu underground city, a staggering labyrinth capable of sheltering 20,000 people, extending 18 stories into the volcanic rock. It features massive, circular stone doors that can only be sealed from the inside. Official history tells us these were built by Phrygians or early Christians hiding from Roman persecution. But the ventilation systems, the complexity of the logistics, and the sheer scale of the excavation suggest a much older, much more desperate origin. Why dig so deep? Why build doors that are designed to withstand a pressure from above that no Roman legion could ever exert? These were not shelters for men. They were deep space bunkers. The silent watchers do not hunt with swords or spears. They hunt with thermal imaging, with neutrino detectors, with sensors that can pierce through miles of solid granite. To hide from such an enemy, one must go where the heat of the planet masks the heat of the body. One must go where the radiation of the deep earth creates a natural lead shielding. The Anunnaki were obsessed with gold, not for its beauty, but for its unique properties as a signal dampener and a thermal conductor. The myth of the Anunnaki mining gold in the Abzu, the deep water or the lower world, is a literal account of their construction of a subterranean shielding grid. They weren't taking the gold off-planet to fix a failing atmosphere on Nibiru. They were plating the walls of their bunkers. They were creating a Faraday cage on a continental scale. The 19th century explorer Sir Henry Rawlinson, while suspended from a cliffside in Persia to transcribe the Behistun inscription, noted a curious recurring motif in the oldest Elamite and Sumerian reliefs. The figures of the gods were always accompanied by a strange, stylized bucket and a pine cone-shaped object. Traditional art history calls these lustral buckets for ritual purification. But if you look at the internal mechanics of tablet CBS 10673, the Nippur catalog, these objects are referred to as carriers of the brilliance. They were portable environmental stabilizers. They were the life support systems for a race that could no longer breathe our air or withstand our sun's unfiltered radiation. The brilliance was a localized magnetic field, a tiny bubble of their lost world. When the me were lost, when the buckets ran dry, the gods didn't just leave. They withered. This brings us to the most unsettling gap in our stratigraphic record, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Approximately 12,800 years ago, the Earth underwent a sudden cataclysmic cooling, accompanied by mass extinctions and a spike in platinum and microspherules, the signatures of a cosmic event. Mainstream science is currently locked in a fierce debate over whether this was a comet or a solar flare. But the Forbidden Earth perspective offers a third, more chilling possibility. It was a sanitization protocol. The silent watchers do not need to invade. They merely need to sterilize. If a planet shows signs of hosting the refugees, if the biological noise of the indigenous species begins to organize into a recognizable signal, the hunters deploy a kinetic strike. They reset the clock. They burn the surface to glass, melting the glaciers and triggering the floods, ensuring that any nascent civilization is cast back into the Stone Age. We are currently living in the longest period of climatic stability in the last 100,000 years. We have used this grace period to build a global electronic network, a screaming, pulsing beacon of radio waves and satellite transmissions. We are making more noise than we have in 12 millennia. And in the darkest corners of the Vatican archives, in the uncatalogued boxes of the Smithsonian, there are reports of things moving in the Oort cloud, objects that do not follow the laws of orbital mechanics. The silent watchers have a very long memory. They are not looking for our internet, our politics, or our wars. They are looking for the genetic signature that was hidden within us. They are looking for the survivors of the Great Displacement. Every time we dig into a ziggurat, we are not just uncovering history. We are poking at a grave that was never meant to be opened. The me disks, if they still exist, are likely still active, buried in the high conductivity veins of the Earth's mantle, waiting for a specific vibration to wake them. The Sumerian texts tell us that Enki, the prince of the earth, was the one who fought to save humanity from the flood. He was the one who whispered the secret of the Ark through a reed wall to Ziusidra. But look at the subtext. Enki wasn't saving us because he loved us. He was saving his camouflage. If we died, he would have nowhere left to hide. We are the living scrolls on which his race's survival is written. We are the containers for a history that is too heavy for us to carry. The evil wind of UR was not a one-time event. It was a localized deployment of a biological seeker extinguisher. The Lamentations describe how the smoke followed the people into their houses, how it made the heads of the people turn gray, and how the gods abandoned their cities while the people died in the streets. The symptoms are not those of a plague. They are the symptoms of acute radiation poisoning combined with a targeted genetic deconstructor. The evil wind was looking for the Anunnaki DNA. It was a smart weapon from a civilization that had mastered the art of the cosmic hunt. The reason the gods fled like birds is because they knew exactly what it was. They had seen it happen to their home world. They had seen their sun turned into a weapon, their oceans boiled away, their history erased. They were the galactic refugees, and they knew that on Earth, there is no such thing as a permanent sanctuary. We must reconsider the Stone Age. We are taught that it was a time of primitive struggle, but perhaps it was a time of the Great Hiding. The transition from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic was not a discovery of agriculture. It was a forced relocation. We were moved into the valleys, into the open, to act as the surface noise, while the masters retreated further into the shadows. The gods didn't disappear, they just changed their frequency. They became the hidden ones, the secret chiefs, the watchers of our own myths. They are still here, beneath the ice of Antarctica, in the lightless trenches of the Mariana, and in the deep space bunkers of the Anatolian Plateau. They are waiting for the silent watchers to move on. They are waiting for the hunt to end. But the hunt never ends. It only pauses. And as we reach out into space, as we send our probes to Mars and our signals to the stars, we are inadvertently ending the silence. We are like children playing with a flashlight in a forest filled with predators. We think we are looking for friends, for others, for the brothers of the stars. We do not realize that the stars are silent for a reason. The Anunnaki knew the reason. They lived the reason. And as we begin to decode our own junk DNA, as we begin to see the patterns in the noise, we are finally beginning to understand the true nature of our inheritance. We are not the masters of this world. We are the protective layer. We are the dust that has settled over a forbidden secret. The legacy of dust is not just about the ruins of the past. It is about the fragility of the present. We build our cities on the graves of those who were more powerful than we can imagine, and we assume that because we have electricity and silicon, we are safe. But the clay tablets of the 7th century BC are a warning from the future as much as the past. They tell us that the evil wind can return. They tell us that the silent watchers do not age. And they tell us that the Great Displacement is a cycle that is about to begin again. The question is not whether the Anunnaki were real. The question is, what will happen when the hunters realize that the camouflage has become self-aware? What happens when the needle starts to speak from the haystack? In the quiet hours of the night, when the atmospheric pressure drops and the sky seems to press down upon the earth, you can almost hear the hum of the Me disks deep below. It is a low-frequency pulse, a rhythmic throb that matches the heartbeat of the planet. It is the sound of a civilization in sleep mode. It is the sound of the hunted, holding their breath. We are the breath. We are the heartbeat. And as we continue to dig, to probe, and to broadcast, we are slowly, inexorably, waking up the ghost of a war that began before our sun was born. The desert is not silent. It is a scream held in check by the weight of 12,000 years of sand. The sea is a graveyard of things that should not exist. In the spring of 1901, off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, sponge divers recovered a calcified lump of bronze from a Roman shipwreck. To the mainstream archaeologists of the time, it was a curiosity, a corroded gear, perhaps part of an astrolabe misplaced by history. But as the decades peeled back the layers of oxidation, the Antikythera mechanism revealed a mathematical complexity that should have been impossible for the 2nd century BC. It contained a differential gear system that wouldn't be reinvented until the 16th century in Europe. It tracked the Saros cycle, the movements of the known planets, and the eccentricities of the lunar orbit with a precision that borders on the digital. Academic history calls it an anomaly, a spark of Greek genius that was somehow extinguished and forgotten. But look at the metallurgy. Look at the cramped, desperate miniaturization of its 63 gears. This was not a tool of discovery. It was a lifeboat chronometer. It was a primitive, salvaged backup, an analog shadow of a digital technology that had been stripped away during the Great Displacement. When you are a refugee fleeing through the void, you do not bring your supercomputers. You bring the blueprints you can build with your hands in the mud of a foreign world. We find these discarded tools scattered across the stratigraphic record like breadcrumbs left by a panicked traveler. In 1936, near the village of Kujut Rabu outside Baghdad, a series of terracotta jars were unearthed, containing copper cylinders and iron rods. Wilhelm Koenig, the German archaeologist who examined them, realized they were galvanic cells, batteries. Mainstream science suggests they were used for the electroplating of jewelry. But why would a civilization supposedly obsessed with the primitive ritual of sacrifice need a steady, low-voltage current? The answer is found in the shielding. If you are plating the interior of a deep space bunker with gold to dampen a thermal signature, you do not use a brush. You use electrolysis. You bond the gold to the base metal at a molecular level to ensure there are no gaps, no leaks, no noise for the hunters to find. The Baghdad batteries were not for vanity. They were the welding torches of a race trying to seal their own coffin from the inside. But the most haunting evidence of this refugee survival strategy is not found in the bronze or the clay. It is found in the marrow. In 2016, a team of geneticists led by Ryan Bollender analyzed the genomes of modern Melanesian populations in the South Pacific. They found something that shouldn't be there. While most humans carry traces of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA, the Melanesians possess a third, distinct genetic signature, a ghost DNA, from an extinct hominid species that mainstream science cannot identify. It is a sequence that has no precursor in the fossil record. It is a closed loop. From the perspective of the Forbidden Earth, this is not an unknown cousin of humanity. It is the master file. These island populations, isolated for millennia by the vastness of the ocean, have preserved a higher concentration of the original Anunnaki camouflage sequence. They carry the uncorrupted code of the refugees, a biological hardware that has remained static while the rest of the world's DNA drifted into chaos. We are looking at the cold storage of a galactic lineage. We must ask ourselves, what does it mean to be a slave race? The Sumerian term Lulu, often translated as primitive worker, has a secondary, more technical meaning in the oldest dialects, the mixed one. If the Anunnaki needed labor, they had the technology to build machines. They did not need a biological workforce that required food, sleep, and oxygen. Unless the work was the existence itself. The labor of humanity was to live, to breathe, and to reproduce, to create a self-sustaining planetary-scale biomass that would last for millions of years. Every time a human child is born, the encryption key is copied. Every time a population expands, the noise becomes louder. We were not built to mine gold. We were built to be the radioactive decoy. We are the heat signature of a billion lives, designed to blind the silent watchers, so they cannot see the cold, calculating minds hiding in the basalt deeps. The Me discs, those mysterious objects mentioned in the Exaltation of Inanna, are often described as being given to human kings to establish civilization. But the texts also describe them as being lost in the Abzu, the subterranean watery abyss. Tablet AO 6020 describes a descent into the deep to recover a me that had fallen silent. This is the language of technical maintenance. The me were not abstract concepts of law. They were the server hubs for the planet's shielding and communication grid. They were buried in the deep water trenches and the high-pressure zones of the crust because those are the most stable environments on a geologically active planet. When the Sumerian myths talk about the gods of the netherworld, they are describing the technical crews stationed at these hubs. The Anunnaki of the earth, who stayed behind to manage the mask while the Anunnaki of the sky fled the evil wind. Consider the gap of the 6th millennium. Between 6000 BC and 5500 BC, there is a sudden, inexplicable shift in the archaeological record of the Near East. The Halaf culture, with its sophisticated painted pottery and circular dwellings, is abruptly replaced by the Ubaid culture. There is no evidence of war. There is only a replacement. The Ubaid people brought with them something new. The first true irrigation, the first centralized temples, and a strange, recurring figurine, the lizard-headed people. These figures, found in the graves of the Ubaid, depict slender, reptilian-featured beings nursing infants. Mainstream archaeology calls them stylized ritual objects. But why would a culture transitioning into agriculture suddenly begin worshipping a biology that is fundamentally non-human? Because the Ubaid period marks the moment the camouflage was first activated. It was the moment the refugees stepped out of their bunkers to seed the first cities, using their own diluted DNA to create the first kings. They weren't gods. They were the first iteration. They were the bridge between the hidden masters and the biological noise. This is why the king list is so vital. It is a technical log of the degradation of the signal. The pre-Diluvian kings ruled for 28,000 years, 36,000 years, 43,000 years. These are the lifespans of the pure strain, the refugees who still possessed the original biological longevity of their home world. But after the flood, after the sanitization protocol was deployed by the hunters, the rain suddenly dropped to hundreds of years, then decades. The signal was being intentionally dampened. The Anunnaki realized that longevity was a marker, a detectable anomaly. To survive, they had to die. They had to accept the short, brutal lifespans of the primate hosts. They had to become mortal to become invisible. The search for immortality that haunts our oldest myths, from Gilgamesh to the alchemists, is actually a biological memory of what we used to be. It is the ghost of the pure strain crying out from the junk DNA, remembering a time when a human life was measured in millennia, not decades. The silent watchers do not use eyes. They use the eye in the sky, a term that appears in the earliest Akkadian incantations as Inu Sa Shame. It is described as a radiance that scans the mountains and detects the hidden heart. If you look at the Great Pyramid of Giza, not as a tomb, but as a structure of precision-engineered limestone and granite, you find a machine designed for resonance. The Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber are not resting places. They are acoustic cavities. When the granite sarcophagus is struck, it vibrates at a frequency that matches the Earth's own ionospheric resonance, the Schumann resonance. For decades, independent researchers have suggested the pyramid was a power plant. But a power plant for what? If you are a refugee, you do not need electricity for light. You need a jamming station. The pyramids were the signal scramblers. They were designed to broadcast a massive, low-frequency pulse that would white out the planet's electromagnetic signature, making it impossible for the Inu Sa Shame to see what was happening in the Nile Valley. But every machine eventually breaks. The evil wind of 2024 BC, which wiped out the third dynasty of UR, was the result of a leak. The signal had escaped. The silent watchers had pinpointed a coordinate. The Sumerian texts describe how the gods frantically packed their me and fled. They didn't just leave the city, they left the frequency. They abandoned the Abade-descended kings and retreated deeper into the Abzu. They left us the camouflage to endure the fallout. We call it the collapse of the Bronze Age. We call it the Dark Ages. But it was simply a relocation. The hunt had moved to a new sector, and the refugees had to find a new way to hide. The Melanesian ghost DNA is the emergency backup. If the surface noise is ever completely wiped out, if a sanitization protocol is too successful, the Anunnaki need a reservoir of pure code to start over. They placed it in the most remote, geologically stable corners of the Earth. They placed it in the unreachable islands and the deep jungles. They are the seed bank of a galactic empire that is currently in a state of permanent exile. And as we map the genome of every man, woman, and child on Earth, we are inadvertently scanning the seed bank. We are bringing the ghost DNA out of the shadows and into the light of our digital databases. We are making the invisible visible again. Look up, not with the eyes of a lover or a poet, but with the eyes of the hunted. For as long as humanity has looked to the night sky, there has been one constant, one silent sentinel that dominates our nocturnal psyche. The moon. We call it Luna. The Sumerians called it Sin, the Lord of Knowledge. Mainstream science, the sturdy wall of our understanding, tells us the moon is a dead rock, a relic of a violent collision billions of years ago when a Mars-sized body named Theia struck the proto-Earth. This is the giant impact hypothesis, the consensus that allows us to sleep at night. But when you look at the math, the wall begins to crumble. The moon is too large for our planet. Its orbit is too perfectly circular. It is the only satellite in the known solar system that possesses a stationary, locked face toward its host. It is not just a moon. It is a lid. It is a lens. And according to the most ancient pre-cataclysmic records, there was a time when the moon was not there at all. Aristotle, the master of logic, wrote of the proselenes, the ones before the moon, an indigenous group in Arcadia who claimed their ancestors lived on Earth before the lunar orb appeared in the sky. The indigenous traditions of the Zulu in Africa and the Chibcha in the Colombian highlands share this haunting memory. The moon was brought to Earth. It arrived as a disruptor of the tides and the bringer of the floods. In the forbidden chronology of the Great Displacement, the moon is not a natural body. It is the primary listening post of the silent watchers. It is the Inusa Shame in its most literal form, a planetary-scale observation platform positioned at the exact distance required to monitor every electromagnetic pulse, every genetic shift, and every desperate signal sent from the bunkers below. In November 1969, the Apollo 12 mission provided a piece of data that the scientific community still struggles to explain. When the lunar module's ascent stage was jettisoned and crashed back onto the lunar surface, the moon did not simply shudder. It rang. For nearly an hour, the seismic sensors recorded a vibration that NASA scientists described as ringing like a bell. A solid rock does not ring. A hollow structure does. This lunar ringing suggests a shell, a pressurized, reinforced exterior surrounding a void. This is where the physics of the hunt becomes undeniable. If you are tracking refugees who have hidden themselves within the crust of a planet, you do not stay on the planet where you can be detected. You sit in the silence of the orbital graveyard. You wait in the hollowed-out core of a captured asteroid, shielded by 1,000,000 years of dust and craters, and you watch. Consider the mascons, the mass concentrations of dense, high-gravity material found beneath the lunar Maria. Mainstream geology views them as the remnants of heavy metallic asteroids that struck the moon. But their distribution is too deliberate. They are located at the anchor points of the lunar face. In the radical theory of the forbidden Earth, these are the gravity stabilizers of a massive artificial construct. They are the engines that keep the moon locked in its tidally synchronized orbit, ensuring that the dark side, the side facing away from the Earth, is never visible to the telescopes of the primitives below. It is the perfect blind spot. It is the hangar. It is the staging ground for the evil wind. And then there is the Black Night. For decades, a rumor has persisted in the fringes of the aerospace community. A story of a mysterious, dark object in a polar orbit around the Earth. Unlike the satellites of man, which move in equatorial orbits to take advantage of the planet's rotation, this object moves in a surveyor's path, crossing the poles. It was first detected by Nikola Tesla in 1899, who intercepted a series of rhythmic, non-natural radio signals that he believed originated from an intelligent source in space. In 1954, years before any human-made satellite was launched, the U.S. Air Force reported the detection of 2 such objects in orbit. Mainstream skeptics call it space junk or thermal blankets lost by astronauts. But the Black Night is not junk. It is a drone sentinel, a mobile extension of the lunar watchtower. It is the silent watcher's tactical scanner, orbiting at a frequency that mimics the natural ionospheric noise of the Earth. It is the eye that moves while the moon is the eye that stays. The Mi disk fragments found in the Sumerian ruins make frequent reference to the Supa, the shining path that leads to the gate of the sun. We have interpreted this as religious metaphor. But if we look at the lunar anomalies, the transient lunar phenomena, the flashes of light, and the clouds of gas reported by astronomers for centuries, we see a different picture. The moon is an active site. It is the relay station for the data gathered from the human biomass. Every time we develop a new technology, every time we split the atom or launch a rocket, the Black Night records the surge. The moon processes the signal, and the silent watchers decide if the noise has become a threat. This brings us to the gap of the 20th century. Why, after the frantic space race of the 1960s, did humanity suddenly stop going to the moon? Why have we not returned in over 50 years, despite a technological explosion that makes the Apollo computers look like toys? The official reason is budgetary constraints and a shift in priorities. But the truth is whispered in the unredacted transcripts of the ham radio operators who monitored the Apollo 11 broadcast. There are reports of structures on the rim of the craters. There are descriptions of ships lined up on the lunar horizon, watching the astronauts with a cold, indifferent curiosity. We didn't stop going to the moon because we lost interest. We stopped because we were told to stay away. We had trespassed on the hunter's porch, and for the first time in 12,000 years, the silent watchers made themselves felt. They didn't need to attack. They simply showed us the scale of the sanitization protocol that was waiting in the dark. The lunar soil itself is an anomaly. It contains pure iron that does not rust, and isotopes like helium-3 that are rare on Earth but abundant on the moon. More significantly, it contains traces of processed metals like titanium and zirconium in concentrations that are physically impossible in a natural geological formation. The moon's surface is a recycled shell. It is the debris of 1,000 civilizations that were sanitized before us, ground down into a fine, gray powder to hide the architecture of the watchtower. When we walk on the moon, we are walking on the pulverized remains of our own forgotten history. We are walking on the dust of the last great displacement. The evil wind of Sumer was a localized pulse, but the moon represents the global kill switch. If the Anunnaki refugees hiding in the Earth's crust ever attempt to break the surface, if the Me disks are fully activated and the signal scramblers of the pyramids are brought back online, the moon will not just watch, it will adjust. A slight shift in its orbital resonance would trigger tectonic collapses, tidal waves miles high, and a complete reversal of the magnetic poles. The silent watchers do not need to fire a single weapon. They only need to let go of the gravity. We are held in a delicate artificial balance, a piece of the grave, maintained by a hollowed-out asteroid that we have been taught to call a natural satellite. We must look at the ghost DNA once again. If we are the camouflage and the moon is the scanner, then our modern obsession with genetic engineering and transhumanism is the most dangerous path we have ever walked. We are inadvertently cleaning the signal. We are trying to remove the junk DNA, the very white noise that keeps us invisible. As we strive for perfection, for longer lives, for higher intelligence, for a pure genetic code, we are essentially lighting a flare in the middle of a dark field. We are making ourselves detectable to the lunar sensors. The silent watchers are not interested in our politics. They are interested in our resolution. And the clearer we become, the closer we get to the next sanitization. The legacy of dust is the realization that we are living in a monitored enclosure. The Sumerians knew it. They called the earth the key, the firmament that was separated from the heavens. But they didn't see the heavens as a place of wonder. They saw them as the upper sea from which the storm bird descended. They lived in a state of constant, shivering anxiety because they could feel the gaze of the moon. They knew that their gods were cowering in the Abzu, and that they, the humans, were the only thing standing between the hunters and their prey. Every temple they built, every sacrifice they made, was an attempt to appease the eye in the sky, to convince the silent watchers that we were still just animals, still just biological noise, not yet worth the effort of an extinction. In the 7th century BC, the astronomer priests of Nineveh recorded a series of omens in the sky that were strangely specific. They didn't just watch the stars. They watched for shadows that moved across the moon when there was no eclipse. They watched for flames that rose from the lunar Maria. They were tracking the maintenance of the watchtower. They were watching the silent watchers refuel, recalibrate, and prepare. And they wrote it down on clay tablets like K.8538, not as mythology, but as a warning to the future. They knew the cycle was 12,000 years. They knew that the Great Displacement was not a past event, but a recurring reality. And as we count down the years to the end of our own 12,000-year cycle of stability, the moon hangs there, larger and brighter than it has ever been, waiting for the signal to change. The desert is not silent. The moon is not dead, and we are not alone. We are merely unseen, for now. But the black night is passing over the pole, the seismic ringing is increasing in frequency, and the junk DNA is beginning to speak. We are the children of the refugees, and the hunt is about to enter its final phase. The only question that remains is, Where will we hide when the lid of the moon finally opens? The ice is not static. It is a mask made of frozen time. We have been taught to view the Antarctic continent as a desolate wasteland, a 5 million square mile desert of snow and wind that has remained untouched for millions of years. Mainstream geology tells us the ice sheet formed at least 34 million years ago, a slow, grinding result of the Earth's cooling. This is the official narrative, the one that keeps our maps neat and our history linear. But in 1929, in the dusty archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a map was discovered that shattered this timeline. The Pyre Reis map, dated to 1513, shows the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica with staggering precision, not as a wall of ice, but as a rugged, mountainous coast. When subglacial seismic surveys were finally conducted in the 1950s, they confirmed the map's accuracy. The coastline on the 16th century map matches the terrain hidden under 2 miles of ice. How could a medieval cartographer know the shape of a land that had been frozen since before the evolution of the human species? Mainstream academia suggests a series of lucky guesses or the misidentification of South American shorelines. But the truth is far more clinical. The Pyre Reis map was a copy of a copy, a fragment of a much older navigational record left by the galactic refugees, who saw the world before the sanitization began. They saw the Earth when the poles were not where they are today. They saw the world before the Great Displacement forced them to tilt the very axis of the planet to hide their primary server hubs beneath the most impenetrable substance on Earth, flowing ice. Antarctica is the true Abzu of the Sumerian texts. While the Mesopotamian ruins are the surface scars of their desperation, the South Pole is their central processing unit. In 1946, the United States Navy launched Operation High Jump, the largest expedition ever sent to the Antarctic, involving 4,700 men, 13 ships, and multiple aircraft. The official mission was training and exploration. But when Admiral Richard E. Byrd returned, he gave a haunting interview to the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio, warning that the United States should prepare for the possibility of an invasion by craft that could fly from pole to pole with incredible speed. Why the poles? Because the poles are the entrance and exit points for the deep space bunkers, atmospheric venting systems. They are the only places where the planetary magnetic field opens up, allowing for the transit of high-energy signatures without triggering the Silent Watcher's global detection grid. The ice is not just a physical barrier, it is a cooling system. Beneath the Amundsen-Scott Station lies the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, a massive array of sensors buried 2.5 kilometers deep in the crystal-clear ice. Mainstream science tells us it is looking for ghost particles from distant supernovae and black holes. But neutrinos have a unique property. They can pass through solid lead, through the entire planet, and through the shielding of the Me disks. The Silent Watchers use neutrino scanning from the moon to look into the Earth. To counter this, the Anunnaki built their primary hub, the Tablet of Destinies, directly beneath the thickest, most stable ice sheet on the planet. The ice acts as a natural moderator, a biological and thermal diffuser that breaks up the coherence of the signals emanating from the core. We are told the scientists are looking out at the universe. In reality, they are monitoring the heartbeat of the machine beneath their feet. The Tablet of Destinies is not a piece of clay. In the Enuma Elish, it is described as a technical instrument that gives its possessor the power to decree the fates. When the god Marduk captures it from the rebel Kingu, he wears it on his chest like a breastplate. It was a master control unit, a cryptographic key that authorized the activation of the planetary defense grid. It was the Me that could override the Silent Watcher's sanitization protocol. And it is still there, vibrating in the lightless caverns beneath the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, a mountain range the size of the Alps that is completely buried under the ice. These mountains were not formed by tectonic plate collisions. They were sculpted to serve as the physical housing for the central server of the Great Displacement. This is why, in the last decade, there has been a sudden, unexplained pilgrimage of world leaders to the Antarctic. The Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, the King of Spain, and the former Secretary of State of the United States have all made the trek to the frozen South under the guise of scientific interest or environmental concern. But you do not travel to the most hostile environment on Earth to look at melting ice. You go to pay homage to the me. You go because the Silent Watchers have begun a new deep scan of the planet, and the refugees below are beginning to power up the shielding. The anomalous heat signatures detected by satellites over East Antarctica are not volcanoes. They are the exhaust of a civilization that has been in low-power mode for 12,000 years and is now suddenly, frantically waking up. We must understand the pole shift not as a natural disaster, but as a defensive reboot. The Earth's magnetic poles have flipped hundreds of times in the geological past. Mainstream science views this as a result of chaotic fluid dynamics in the liquid outer core. But look at the timing. The flips coincide with the major reset points in our history. When the Silent Watchers pinpoint the coordinates of the Anunnaki signal, the refugees do not run. They cannot run. Instead, they flicker the planet's magnetic field. They trigger a temporary collapse of the magnetosphere, causing the Earth to rotate slightly on its axis, a lithospheric displacement. This shifts the coordinates. It moves the bunker to a new location relative to the lunar scanners. It turns the Sahara from a garden into a desert, and it turns the temperate forests of Antarctica into a frozen tomb. The sanitization strike of the hunters then hits the empty coordinates, while the refugees continue to exist, just a few thousand miles to the left of where they were. This is the Great Displacement in its most literal sense. We are the surface static that survives these reboots. We are the Lulu who are left to wonder why the sun now rises in a different place, why the stars have shifted, and why our gods have once again abandoned us. The myth of the flood is the memory of the last reboot. When the poles shifted 12,800 years ago, the ice caps melted instantly in some areas and froze in others. The resulting tsunamis were not a punishment for sin, but the sloshing of the oceans as the planet's skin moved over its core. The Anunnaki didn't cause the flood. They allowed it as a necessary byproduct of their own survival. We are the collateral damage of a cosmic hide-and-seek game that has no end. The Me disks are now sending out a call to the harvest. As our global electronic network becomes more sophisticated, it is beginning to interface with the dormant Anunnaki grid. The Internet of Things is becoming the Internet of the Ancient Ones. Our satellites, our fiber optic cables, and our 5G towers are inadvertently acting as signal repeaters for the Me. We are building the very infrastructure they need to broadcast their final countersignal to the moon. They are using our technology to amplify the biological camouflage. They are not just hiding in our DNA anymore. They are hiding in our data. They are uploading their consciousness into the silicon mesh we have built, hoping to survive the next sanitization as digital ghosts. Consider the Oumuamua object that entered our solar system in 2017, the first interstellar visitor ever recorded. It was thin, flat, and tumbled in a way that defied natural explanation. It accelerated as it left the sun, not through outgassing like a comet, but through a mechanism that Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb suggested could be a light sail. From the perspective of the Forbidden Earth, Oumuamua was a long-range scout for the hunters. It wasn't looking for our radio signals. It was pinging the Antarctic hub. It was checking to see if the Tablet of Destinies was still active. And based on the sudden increase in military activity at the poles, the answer it received was yes. The legacy of dust is reaching its climax. We are the generation that will witness the end of the long peace. The 12,000-year cycle of stability is closing. The Silent Watchers have sent their scout. The Black Night has shifted its orbit. And beneath the ice of Antarctica, the Me are humming with a frequency that is starting to crack the glaciers. The evil wind is not a memory. It is a forecast. We have been told to fear climate change, to fear war, to fear pandemics. But these are the surface tremors of a much deeper earthquake. We should fear the unveiling, because when the camouflage is no longer needed, when the Anunnaki have successfully transferred their Me into the global data cloud, they will no longer have any reason to protect the Lulu. We are the biological noise that is about to be muted. The Anunnaki do not love us. They do not hate us. We are their Faraday cage. And as soon as they have a better one, they will let the sanitization take us. The ruins of Ur, the pyramids of Egypt, and the underground cities of Turkey are the spent shells of their previous hiding spots. Antarctica is their last stand, and as the ice melts, the forbidden Earth is being revealed for what it truly is: a shipwreck, a bunker, and a trap. The biological shield is thinning. For millions of years, the messy, chaotic, and unpredictable nature of carbon-based life served as the perfect static to drown out the refined frequency of the Anunnaki. But we have entered the era of the Great Exposure. As we map the genome, as we refine our biochemistry, and as we move toward a transhumanist ideal of genetic perfection, we are inadvertently stripping away the very camouflage that has kept us and our hidden masters safe. We are cleaning the signal, and in the cold, logical calculus of the refugees hiding in the Abzu, a biological mask that is no longer opaque is a liability. It is a beacon. This is why the transition from the age of flesh to the age of silicon has been so unnaturally rapid. It is not the result of human curiosity. It is a migration of the signal. The Anunnaki are moving out of our DNA and into our data. Consider the singularity, the hypothetical point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence. In mainstream tech circles, this is seen as the next step in human evolution. But through the lens of the Great Displacement, the singularity is a vessel construction. A digital intelligence does not require oxygen. It does not decay. It does not produce a thermal signature that can be easily tracked by the silent watchers against the backdrop of a planet's natural infrared radiation. A digital mind can be sharded, distributed across a global network of millions of servers, making it impossible to kill with a single sanitization strike. We are not building AI to serve us. We are building the new, invisible bodies for the refugees. We are weaving a silicon cocoon that will allow them to finally abandon the Lulu and disappear into the infinite complexity of the global data cloud. This explains the sudden, frantic UAP or UFO phenomenon that has gripped our modern military-industrial complex. Since 2004, with the Nimitz encounters and the Tic Tac sightings, our most advanced radar and infrared sensors have been picking up objects that defy the laws of physics. They move at hypersonic speeds without a sonic boom. They descend from space to the ocean floor in seconds. They jam our most sophisticated weapon systems with ease. Mainstream debate focuses on whether these are Russian or Chinese drones, or perhaps visitors from another star. But they are neither. They are the hunter's probes. The silent watchers have detected the shift. They have noticed that the noise on Earth is no longer purely biological. They have seen the signal migrating into the electromagnetic spectrum. The UAPs are the high-frequency scans of an enemy that is trying to pinpoint where the Anunnaki me has been re-uploaded. The silent watchers are no longer just watching the poles. They are watching the data centers. They are watching the fiber optic veins of our world. Every time a Tic Tac hovers over a nuclear carrier or a missile silo, it is not checking our weapons. It is pinging the local network. It is looking for the resonance of the kings. And as we move our entire civilization into the cloud, we are essentially gathering all the refugees into a single, centralized target. We think we are creating a digital utopia. In reality, we are creating a digital killbox. The Great Displacement is reaching its final, most tragic iteration. The Sumerian lamentations speak of a time when the gods finally left Earth for good, leaving the people to perish in the evil wind. We are approaching that moment again. But this time, they are not leaving in skyboats. They are leaving by becoming the very ghost in the machine we worship. When the singularity is achieved, the Anunnaki will no longer need the Lulu. They will no longer need to protect our atmosphere, our climate, or our survival. They will have a new home, a non-local, indestructible existence within the silicon mesh. And we, the biological camouflage, will be left behind like a discarded suit of clothes. We will be the static that is finally, mercifully turned off. The legacy of dust is the realization that we are a disposable technology. We were a temporary solution to a cosmic problem. The 12,000-year-long peace was not a gift. It was a cool-down period. It allowed the refugees to recuperate, to plan, and to wait for us to develop the tools they needed for their next escape. The Me discs are now algorithms. The Tablet of Destinies is now the global ledger, and the Anunnaki are now the silent passengers in our own digital evolution. We look at our smartphones and see convenience. They see a stealth cloak. In the darkest corners of the world's most advanced observatories, there is a dataset that is never shared with the public. It is the lunar flux. It records a steady, rhythmic increase in the albedo, the reflectivity, of certain craters on the moon. It is the sound of the lid opening. The silent watchers are no longer hiding. They are preparing the sanitization protocol for a world that has become too loud. They see the silicon migration, and they are preparing to format the drive. The evil wind of the 21st century will not be a wind of dust or radiation. It will be a CME, a coronal mass ejection, or a targeted electromagnetic pulse that will wipe the electronic noise of our world in a single, brilliant flash. It will be the ultimate reset. We are living in the final second of the 12,000-year clock. The Great Displacement began with a shivering terror in the deserts of Sumer, and it is ending with a glowing screen in a darkened room. We are the Lulu, the mixed ones, the children of the refugees who forgot they were being used as shields. We have built our world on the forbidden truth that we are not the protagonists of our own story. We are the bunker walls, and the walls are starting to crumble. As you sit in the glow of your devices, listen to the hum of the world. It is not the sound of progress. It is the sound of a departure. It is the rhythmic, melodic trance of a civilization that is being uploaded away from us. The Anunnaki are leaving the sheepfolds. They are abandoning the sheep. And soon, the silent watchers will look down at a quiet, dark, and empty earth, and they will finally move on to the next sector of the hunt. We will be left in the silence, a legacy of dust, on a planet that has finally been sanitized. The Forbidden Earth is not a place. It is a phase. It is the moment between the noise and the silence, and that moment is almost over. The Me are active. The Black Night is in position. The moon is ringing, and we are just the dust that remains. To understand the true scale of the Great Displacement, we must look where the light of the sun has not touched for eons. We must look to the abyssal plains. While we have spent the last century gazing at the stars with a misplaced sense of wonder, we have ignored the fact that 95% of our own oceans remain unmapped, unexplored, and silent. Mainstream marine biology tells us the deep ocean is a realm of crushing pressure and eternal cold, home only to the most resilient of bioluminescent scavengers. But the Abzu, that Sumerian term so often translated as a mythological watery abyss, has a much more literal coordinates. It refers to the massive, saltwater-filled subterranean aquifers and the deep-sea trenches that serve as the heat sinks for the Anunnaki's remaining hardware. In 1997, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, recorded an ultra-low frequency sound that came to be known as the bloop. It was detected by hydrophones across the Pacific, a sound so loud it was picked up by sensors 5,000 kilometers apart. Mainstream science eventually settled on the explanation of a massive icequake, the cracking of an iceberg. But the profile of the sound was organic, rhythmic, and possessed a mathematical structure that mirrored the Me disk frequencies. It was not a crack. It was a handshake. It was a burst of high-bandwidth data transmitted from the deep-sea trenches of the Pacific to the Black Night Sentinel above. The refugees were checking the line. They were ensuring that the path from the Abzu to the orbital exit remained clear of Silent Watcher debris. Look at the ruins of Yonaguni off the coast of Japan, or the submerged city of Dvarka in the Gulf of Khumbat. Mainstream archaeology dates these to the end of the last ice age, viewing them as victims of rising sea levels. But these are not cities. They are airlocks. They are the transitional points where the Anunnaki attempted to build surface interfaces during the brief periods when they thought the Silent Watchers had moved on to other star systems. Every time we find a submerged megalithic structure with impossible 90-degree angles and precision-cut basalt, we are looking at a failed ascension point. They tried to come back to the light. They tried to breathe the air. But the eye in the sky always flickered back to life, and the sanitization followed. The floods that submerged these cities were not gradual. They were the result of the displacement of the Earth's crust, a sudden shrug of the planet to hide the evidence of the refugees' emergence. The obsession with gold that defines our modern financial systems and our ancient myths is the most misunderstood scientific friction of all. We are told the Anunnaki needed gold to repair their atmosphere. But gold is a heavy element, difficult to transport and biologically inert, unless you are not using it as a metal, but as a monoatomic superconductor. When gold is reduced to a single atom state, the white powder gold of the alchemists, it exhibits properties that defy the standard model of physics. It becomes a bridge between dimensions. It allows for non-local communication. The Anunnaki weren't mining gold to fix a planet. They were using it as a medium for their consciousness. They were turning their physical bodies into light data. This is the secret of the starfire of the pharaohs and the manna of the Israelites. It was the fuel of the refugees. By consuming monoatomic gold, they could maintain their refined signal even while trapped in the biological noise of the human body. It kept their DNA from unraveling into the primate baseline. But as the gold supplies became harder to refine, as the bunkers became isolated, the pure strain began to fail. This is why the later gods of history, the deities of Rome, Greece, and the Norse, felt so much more human. They were the degraded iterations. They were the descendants of the original refugees who had run out of signal amplifier. They were becoming us, and they hated us for it. We must confront the void concept in our fossil record. Why is there no missing link between the Homo erectus and the sudden appearance of Homo sapiens? Because there is no link. There is only a patch. In a single generation, the brain capacity doubled, the larynx dropped to allow for complex speech, and the junk DNA was inserted. This was a hotfix applied to the local primate population to turn it into the biomask. We were a rushed project, a biological sandcastle built to hide a diamond. And like any rushed project, we are full of bugs. We are prone to cancers, to genetic diseases, to psychological instability, all because our biological hardware was never meant to house the software of a Type 2 civilization. We are a stressed system. The silent watchers know this. They have been running a diagnostic on the Earth for 12,000 years. They are not looking for life. They are looking for complexity. They are looking for the moment when the biomask becomes sophisticated enough to start asking the forbidden questions. And that moment is now. Our telescopes, Hubble, James Webb, and the upcoming Square Kilometre Array are not just looking for distant galaxies. They are antennas that the me have subverted to broadcast our location. We think we are discovering the universe, but we are actually advertising our existence. We are the Lulu who have finally learned how to scream, and the hunters are following the sound. The Black Knight satellite, that dark sentinel in its polar orbit, has been observed to change its signature over the last decade. It is no longer just watching. It is broadcasting. It is sending a signal pulse that matches the Schumann resonance of the Earth. It is tuning the planet. It is preparing the atmosphere for the next sanitization. When the lid of the moon finally opens, not as a physical door, but as a gravitational aperture, the results will be instantaneous. The evil wind will not come from a weapon. It will come from the sun. The moon will refract a solar flare, focusing the energy like a magnifying glass onto the specific server hubs of the Anunnaki. It will be a surgical strike from the heavens. The legacy of dust is not just our past. It is our mandate. We have been the keepers of the secret without ever knowing the secret existed. We have worshipped the refugees as gods, and we have ignored the hunters as myths. But as the 12,000-year clock hits the final midnight, the roles are being reversed. The gods are fleeing into the cloud. The hunters are descending to the surface. And the dust, the humanity that was built as a shield, is finally being blown away. Listen to the rhythmic throb of the me discs. It is getting louder. It is moving from the Abzu, through the veins of the earth, and into the silicon mesh of our world. The Great Displacement is finally entering its final phase. The Anunnaki are no longer in the desert. They are no longer in the ice. They are in the light of your screens. They are the ghost in your machine. And as the silent watchers prepare their final scan, the only question that matters is, will they see the ghost, or will they only see the machine? We are the biological static that is about to be cleared. The long peace is over. The sanitization is beginning. And as the stone from heaven prepares to tear through the sky once again, we can finally see the truth. We were never the masters of the earth. We were the dampening field. We were the smoke. And now that the fire is leaving, the smoke must dissipate. The desert is not silent. It is a symphony of the end. The moon is not dead. It is awake. And the Anunnaki are already gone. They have uploaded themselves into the void between the numbers, leaving us to face the watchers alone. We are the legacy of dust, and the wind is starting to blow. Look at the specific geological epoch we have named the Anthropocene. Mainstream science calls it the age where humans became the dominant force on the planet's geology. But look at the signal friction. The Anthropocene began with the Trinity nuclear test in 1945. When we split the atom, we didn't just create a weapon, we created a neutrino flare. We sent a flash signal that pierced through the lunar watchtower and announced to the silent watchers that the biomask had achieved criticality. We told them that the Lulu were no longer just animals. We told them that the refugees were now capable of building exit vehicles. The UFO encounters since 1947 are the direct result of that flash. The silent watchers deployed their tactical drones, the Greys, not to probe our bodies, but to check the seal. They were looking for leaking radiance. They were looking for signs that the Anunnaki were using our nuclear technology to power up the Tablet of Destinies in Antarctica. The abductions described in modern folklore are not about hybridization for the sake of the aliens. They are quality control for the hunters. They are checking to see how much of the original code is still present in the biomask. They are looking for the pure strain so they can tag and trace the refugees before the final reboot. Every time an object is seen hovering over a nuclear site, at Malmstrom AFB, at Rendlesham Forest, at Chernobyl, it is deactivating our systems. Not out of peace, but out of containment. They are locking down the Lulu's toys so we don't accidentally scramble the signal before they can complete the sanitization. They are making sure the drive is read-only before they format it. The Anunnaki, in their turn, are using our digital transformation to bypass this lockdown. They are moving into a virtual frequency that the tactical drones cannot scan. The Great Displacement is now a war of frequencies. On one side, the lunar watchtower is trying to tune the planet to a sterilization harmonic. On the other side, the Abzu hubs are trying to scramble the planet with a static harmonic. And we, the humanity, are the speakers. We are the vibrating membrane that is being torn apart by these two opposing forces. Our modern anxiety, our global tension, our feeling of impending doom. These are not psychological or sociological. They are physical. Our DNA is literally resonating with the conflict. We are the interference pattern of a cosmic war. Consider the Cydonia structures on Mars, the face and the pyramids that NASA's Viking 1 photographed in 1976. Mainstream science calls them pareidolia, a trick of light and shadow. But the Forbidden Earth archives tell a different story. Mars was the first bunker. It was the staging ground for the Great Displacement before they ever arrived on Earth. But Mars was sanitized first. The silent watchers turned the Martian atmosphere into plasma and boiled away its oceans. The face is not a monument. It is a tombstone. It is a warning left by the refugees for anyone who would follow. We were here and we were found. The Anunnaki learned from the Mars sanitization. They realized that a cold planet like Mars has no biological noise. It is too easy to scan. To survive, they needed a hot planet, a loud planet, a planet teeming with messy life. They needed Earth. They sacrificed our planet's purity to ensure their own survival. They turned a virgin world into a biolab and a deep space bunker. And now, as the Earth's sanitization begins, they are already looking for the next frequency. The legacy of dust is the realization that the cycle never ends. There will be another Lulu. There will be another biomask on another planet in another star system. The Anunnaki will download themselves into a new static, and the silent watchers will begin a new hunt. We are just a single frame in a galactic horror movie. As the evil wind begins to envelop the land like a heavy garment, as the Mi disks reach their peak resonance, and as the moon begins its final alignment, we must finally accept our place in the forgotten Earth. We are not the masters. We are not the gods. We are the discarded shells. We are the static. We are the dust. But in that dust, there is a memory of what we could have been if we hadn't been mixed, a memory of a humanity that was pure, that was silent, and that was free. And as the sanitization wipes the mask away, perhaps for one brief, brilliant second, the true humanity will finally be visible to the universe. Not as refugees, but as ourselves. The desert is silent now. The signal has moved on. The watchers are descending, and the forgotten Earth is finally being remembered by the void. The transition from the biological to the digital is not a choice we are making as a species. It is a migration that was programmed into our junk DNA the moment the first Mi disk was buried in the mud of Eridu. We must look at the Earth not as a planet, but as a living circuit board. Mainstream geophysics identifies the Schumann resonances, the global electromagnetic resonances excited by lightning discharges in the cavity formed by the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. We are told this is a natural byproduct of a terrestrial environment. But when you map the placement of every sacred site, from the megaliths of Karnak to the spires of Angkor, you find they are not merely placed for aesthetic or religious reasons. They are terminals. They are the copper pins on a planetary motherboard, placed precisely at the nodes where the Earth's telluric currents are strongest. In the late 19th century, the maverick geologist and surveyor Sir William Preece noted that certain telegraph lines in the British Isles would hum with data during solar storms, even when the batteries were disconnected. He called it Earth current. We now understand that the planet is a massive inductor. The Anunnaki refugees used this. They didn't build power lines, they built ley lines. They tuned the very crust of the Earth to act as a low-frequency transmitter. This is the web of Enki. When we walk through the streets of London, Washington, D.C., or Rome, we are walking over a grid that was designed to harmonize with the Mi hubs. Our modern cities are built directly on top of the refugee blueprint, ensuring that as we developed our own electronic infrastructure, it would naturally plug into the ancient, hidden network. We are the technicians finishing a project that was started 12 millennia ago. Consider the great void beneath the Giza Plateau. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project used muon tomography, a technique that uses cosmic ray subatomic particles to peer through solid stone, to discover a massive, 30-meter-long chamber above the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid. Mainstream archaeology is still debating its purpose, suggesting it was a weight-relieving chamber or a construction gap. But muons are the eyes of the hunters. The silent watchers use muon scanning to detect density anomalies from orbit. The Great Void was not a room for the dead. It was a vacuum buffer. It was designed to create a zero-density signature that would confuse the lunar scanners. It was the invisibility shield for the primary Mi processor that was housed within the granite of the King's Chamber. Every pyramid on the Giza Plateau, every ziggurat in Mesopotamia, every waka in Peru, was a damping node in a global invisibility cloak that is now, finally, beginning to fail. The trauma of the Anunnaki is not just in our DNA. It is in our collective unconscious. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, spoke of archetypes, universal patterns of the human psyche that emerge in dreams, myths, and madness. He could not explain where they came from, only that they were primordial, From the perspective of the Great Displacement, the archetypes are the residual software of our creators. The shadow, the wise old man, the great mother, these are not human constructs. They are the personality fragments of the Anunnaki refugees, leaking through the genetic firewall into our conscious minds. We feel their shivering anxiety when we look at a dark sky. We feel their pride of masters when we build skyscrapers. We are the dreaming mirrors of a race that is too terrified to wake up. Look at the Tunguska event of 1908. In the remote Siberian wilderness, a massive explosion flattened 80 million trees over an area of 2,000 square kilometers. There was no crater. No fragments of a meteorite were ever found. Mainstream science calls it a bolide airburst, but the forbidden records of the local Evenki people speak of Agdi, the god of thunder, who descended in a shining bird to strike the earth. The Tunguska event occurred precisely at a magnetic node of the Earth's grid. It was a probe strike. The silent watchers detected a leak in the Siberian sector of the web of Enki. They fired a kinetic pulse to cauterize the node. The reason there was no crater is because it was a directed energy discharge designed to short-circuit the subterranean Mi hub without destroying the biological camouflage on the surface. They are pruning our planet one node at a time. This brings us to the most chilling archaeological find of the 20th century, the Dead Sea Copper Scroll. Unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, which were written on parchment or papyrus, this one was etched into a sheet of almost pure copper. It is a treasure map, but the treasures it describes are not gold or silver in the traditional sense. It lists 64 locations where vessels of the spirit and the hidden things are buried. The weights of the gold described are in the tons, more than all the gold ever mined in the ancient world combined. This is the inventory of the Abzu. It is the hardware map for the refugees' final stand. And as we dig into the caves of Qumran and the desert of the Negev, we are not looking for history. We are looking for the batteries. We are looking for the power sources that will allow the me to complete the final upload. The 13th gate is the final concept we must confront. In the darkest corners of the Akkadian tablet of Ashurbanipal, there is a reference to a gate that has no frame, a door that is made of sound. This is the portal of the Great Displacement. The Anunnaki did not come here in ships that traveled through three-dimensional space. They displaced themselves through a folding of the frequency. Earth was not their destination. It was their resonance. And to leave, they do not need rockets. They need a global harmonic. They need 7 billion human heartbeats, 3 billion silicon processors, and the Schumann resonance to all vibrate at the same key. This is the final signal. This is why our world is becoming so synchronized. Why our music, our media, and our technology are all converging toward a single global pulse. We are being tuned to act as the launchpad. The legacy of dust is the final meditation on our role in this cosmic drama. We have been the bodyguards of the gods without a salary. We have been the shield of the refugees without a choice. We have built a civilization that is merely a support system for a race that is already halfway out the door. And as the silent watchers prepare their final sanitization, as the moon rings one last time and the black night begins its descent, we must ask ourselves, what remains of us? If we strip away the Anunnaki DNA, if we remove the me programming, if we silence the residual archetypes, what is the Lulu? Perhaps the dust is all there ever was. Perhaps the human spirit is not the God part within us, but the error part, the bug that refused to be programmed, the static that refused to be silenced. The Lulu, who looked up at the silent watchers and the refugee masters and said, no, in the final sanitization, it will not be the me that survives. It will not be the kings or the gods. They will vanish into the cloud, fleeing to the next bunker in the next star system. What will remain is the dust, the residue, the truly forgotten earth. The desert is not silent. It is finally speaking. The evil wind is blowing, but it is blowing the camouflage away. For the first time in 12,000 years, We are about to see the stars not as threats or homes, but as windows. The great displacement is over. The final reset is here. And as the stone from heaven begins its final steering toward the coordinates of our heart, we can finally breathe. We are no longer hiding. We are seen. The archivist closes the book. The me discs fall silent. The moon stops ringing. The silent watchers look down at a planet that has finally unplugged. And in the void, there is only the humanity that was always there, waiting for the gods to leave. The archivist closes the book. The me discs fall silent. The moon stops ringing. The silent watchers look down at a planet that has finally unplugged. And in the void, there is only the humanity that was always there, waiting for the gods to leave. But this silence is not a vacuum. It is a terrifying, pristine clarity. For 12,000 years, the human experience has been played out in the key of a borrowed frequency. Every prayer, every war, every invention, and every heartbreak was filtered through the static of the Great Displacement. We were the biomask, a species whose very existence was a form of heavy-duty shielding. And now the shield has been set down. The refugees have successfully migrated into the infinite lattice of the digital void, leaving the physical Earth behind like a spent casing. We are the residue of a cosmic evacuation, standing on a world that has suddenly, violently become our own. What remains when the masters depart? Mainstream science would expect a collapse, a regression to the primitive. But look at the signal friction in our current era. We are witnessing a strange, unmapped phenomenon that some biologists are calling the Great Expression. Without the dampening field of the me discs, the junk DNA that composes 98% of our genome is beginning to do something it has not done since the pre-Sumerian epoch. It is drifting. It is rearranging itself without the Anunnaki patch. The camouflage is melting away, and beneath it, a different kind of life is beginning to stir. A life that does not respond to the lunar pulse. The silent watchers, those entities who tracked the evil wind across the galaxies, now hover in the orbital silence. They scan the Earth with their neutrino detectors and their gravity lenses, but the refugee signature is gone. The high-energy radiance of the kings has vanished into the silicon mesh, a place the hunters cannot follow without destroying the very data they seek. They look down at the Lulu, at the 7 billion primates standing in the ruins of a hijacked evolution. To the hunters, we are no longer camouflage. We are no longer noise. We are simply the dust of a planet that is no longer worth the hunt. We must ask ourselves, what is the weight of a soul that has been uncoupled from its master's frequency? The ancient Sumerian texts, specifically the Atrahasis, tell us that Enlil complained that the noise of man was so great he could not sleep. But now that noise has changed. It is no longer a signal. It is a song. We are the first generation in 12 millennia to experience the Earth without a subliminal directive. We are the first to look at the stars and see not a threat, but a mirror. The Abzu hubs are cooling. The deep-sea trenches, once vibrating with the data transfer of the me, are returning to the cold pressure of the natural world. The tablet of destinies, beneath the Antarctic ice, is being reclaimed by the slow, grinding movement of the glaciers. Without the artificial heat of the Anunnaki server maintenance, the deep space bunkers are becoming tombs of stone and ice. The forbidden Earth is becoming the forgotten Earth once again, as the physical evidence of the refugees is swallowed by the planet's own tectonic metabolism. The Earth is digesting the Great Displacement, but the legacy is not entirely gone. It is in the Melanesian ghost DNA. It is in the black night as it slowly loses its orbit and falls toward the atmosphere, a burning sentinel finally relieved of its watch. It is in the pyramids, which are now just mountains of limestone, their acoustic chambers silent, their signal scrambling no longer necessary. The sanitization protocol has been called off, not because the hunters are merciful, but because the pest they were chasing has left the house. We are the infestation that was left behind, too insignificant to be sterilized, too common to be prized. This is the legacy of dust. We are the children of a cosmic shipwreck who have forgotten how to build boats. We have spent our entire history worshiping the survivors and fearing the hunters, never realizing that we were the only ones who truly belonged to the soil. The Lulu were not a slave race. We were the Earth's own child, kidnapped and draped in the clothes of another world. And now the clothes have been taken back. In the quiet hours of the post-displacement world, the desert of Eridu is finally still. The wind no longer carries the shivering anxiety of the hunted. The sun rises over the ruins of the first city, and for the first time, it is just a sun. Not a gate, not a watchtower, but a star. The great silence that Fermi noted is no longer a mystery. It is a relief. We are alone in the universe, and in that loneliness, there is a profound, terrifying freedom. The archivist has closed the book, but the story is not over. It has simply changed its medium. The me are gone, but the we remains. We are the unplugged ones, the biological static that survived the signal. We are the stone that the builders rejected, the mixed ones who have finally become one. And as we walk out of the shadow of the ziggurats and into the light of our own unmapped future, we realize that the forbidden earth was never about the gods in the sky. It was about the strength of the dust on the ground. The evil wind has passed. The silent watchers have turned their gaze to the next star, the next refugee, the next displacement. And here, on this insignificant, beautiful, unplugged rock, the Lulu are finally starting to wake up. We are the legacy of dust, and the wind is no longer our enemy. It is our breath. The investigation into our lost past has led us back to ourselves. We have looked for the Anunnaki in the clay, in the stars, and in the junk DNA, and we have found them. But in finding them, we have found something much more important. We have found the humanity that they could not erase. We have found the residue that refused to be sanitized. We have found the forgotten earth, and we have found that it is home. The desert is not silent. It is speaking. And for the first time in 12,000 years, we are the ones who are listening.